Here's
Here
our
we go.
CCL Health Action Team tonight with members from both the Health Action Team and the Electrification Action Team. Pete Marsh and Joanne Leobe leading the discussion tonight.
Thanks, Lori. And I'm happy to be here with Pete. I'm happy to be here with this experiment of bringing together two action teams to see if we can work on CCL policy together. And I know that we're coming from a variety of backgrounds. I think there may be some folks on the call who are not yet Citizens Climate Lobby members. And if that's so, well, you should join because it's free and you can be as involved or not involved as you want to be. When you join, you will have the opportunity to be connected with a chapter in your community or your local area and to join either the Health Action Team, the Electrification Action Team, or both. And so if you just go to citizensclimatelobby.org, you can learn more about us. For the rest of us, I know there's folks here who are deeply involved in climate and health, and I'm hoping to learn from them. I'm hoping to learn from Pete and all the other experts about electrification in buildings, a thing that I actually don't know a lot about coming into this. And so I'm hoping we can just have kind of some short presentations and plenty of time for some discussion and interaction as we build the health case for electrification. So, the things that I want us to take away from this are to focus on not so much on climate change itself, but on air pollution, which is a really uh, powerful motivator that we can use in order to affect change. It has wide-ranging health harms. I'm curious about what you all think about when you hear about air pollution. What does it do bad for health? Anybody have a thought about that? Lots of times, the first thing I hear is about asthma. It makes asthma worse, and that is true, but it does lots of other things. So we're going to look into that, and including thinking about things we don't often think about or recognize as caused by air pollution. And we're going to take a look about buildings as a serious source of air pollution and something that we can fix. So let's take it away. I'd like to start with just a little bit of my background. I'm a family doctor. I've lived in Las Vegas for almost 25 years. It's a fabulous place with great food and great entertainment and mostly great weather, especially this time of year. But if you've ever been here, it's pretty obvious it hits you over the head when you come that this is a place where sustainability is really important. And for a long time, I was concerned about climate change and about sustainability. And I didn't really link it to my professional identity at all. But when I kind of stepped back a little, I worked first for many years in Boulder City, which is a little town that's the gateway to Hoover Dam and Lake Mead. And you can see on the left-hand side a picture of Lake Mead with that bathtub ring from the lake level that's dropped over 80 feet. When I started working there, there was no bathtub ring, and I watched it form as I worked there over about 14 years. And then the last 9 to 10 years of my practice career, I worked in a community health center in a low income area in one of the heat islands of Las Vegas, which are all pretty much located in low income areas. And you can see there's a lot of pavement. There's just a lot of heat at the bottom of our bowl, and I really treated patients that were affected with heat-related illness and other climate-related illnesses. I've done some global health work in both West Africa and in Guatemala, working with primarily subsistence farming populations. And they will tell you clearly that their seasons have changed, that farming is not what it used to be. You can't count on the rains in the same way. They are very clearly impacted by climate change. And I've done some disaster relief work after hurricanes. And so clearly, when I thought about it, and when I got to know some folks here in the Health Action Team, I realized that my professional identity and my climate activism really go hand in hand, and that climate change is at its core a crisis for human health. And so we're just going to spend a few minutes talking about that. This wheel, which at least until recently was available on the CDC site, kind of shows you at the center rising greenhouse gases in the atmosphere cause higher temperatures, more extreme weather, rising sea levels. That leads to the environmental changes that you see in the second layer of the wheel, heat and water quality issues, waterborne diseases, vector-borne diseases, mental health problems, and the specific health concerns that come out of that. And so that's a lot. That is a huge topic. And luckily, we're not going to talk about it all. We're just going to focus on this green section, the air pollution, because it causes 9 million deaths globally per year, and probably, depending on the estimate, about 250,000 here in the US every year. So let's just think about that. I like to simplify things for myself, and so I usually break air pollution down into two main kinds of pollutants. The first one is ozone. Ozone is sometimes called smog, and it forms from tailpipe emissions, from fossil fuel power plant emissions, from building emissions, and it loves to form especially under hot, sunny conditions. So Las Vegas has a big summer ozone problem. We have some evidence about the health impacts of ozone. We know that it's bad for heart disease. It causes more emergency visits for cardiac problems, for lung disease, more asthma flares. There's good evidence that it has perinatal impacts, including more preterm birth and low birth weight infants. And it's likely that it's also associated with neurodevelopmental problems in young children. So I think that thinking about what it's doing to our brains and especially to the brains of children in our society is really useful. And then the second pollutant is particulate pollution or fine particle pollution. And this graphic is familiar, I think, to a lot of you. It shows, kind of depicts the relative sizes of some grains of beach sand. That long thing that looks like a shofar is a human hair. And the little blue dots are 10 micron particles. Those are called PM10. That's the size of a small grain of dust or pollen, a small piece of mold that's airborne. And so much of that is not necessarily caused by fossil fuel combustion. The little red dots, just a quarter the size of a blue dot, are 2.5 microns or less in diameter, and those are we refer to as PM 2.5. They are invisible to the naked eye. They are very important because they're largely produced by fossil fuel combustion, although not only by fossil fuel combustion. They are so small that we can breathe them in. They pass easily into the alveoli, the small air pockets in the lungs, and they can be absorbed from there into the circulation. Our brain has a barrier that filters out certain toxins, but PM 2.5 can pass through the blood-brain barrier, so it travels all over the body to all the organs, including the brain, and it has pro-inflammatory effects. It causes abnormal inflammation in the body. And when you think about inflammation, we know that it's a causative factor, out of control inflammation in lots of diseases. So what we know about PM 2.5 and our other ultrafine particle, which is called PM1 because they're less than 1 micron in diameter, is that we believe that they are associated with lots of health problems. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. When we talk about evidence for air pollution, it's a little different than what we usually talk about in clinical medicine. You know, when in clinical medicine, we like to do a randomized controlled study. We take a group of patients and we give them a drug, and we take a group of patients and we give them a placebo, and we measure what happens to each group. You obviously can't do that for air pollution exposure. It's both impractical and unethical to expose certain people purposely to air pollution and have a placebo group. So what we look at is mostly large-scale epidemiologic evidence where they study groups of census tracts or Medicare participants over a group of zip codes, something like that, where we look at population-based studies. And we can show that one group might have more of one disease than the other group. We can say that the exposure is associated with a disease, it's really hard to prove that it's a cause of the disease. Causation is a lot harder to show. So to feel comfortable about the evidence, we usually like to see a variety of studies with different groups of people that all point to the same basic conclusion in order to feel comfortable that there really is a connection there. So when we have somebody that's exposed for a few days to these fine particulates like PM 2.5, so let's suppose a wildfire comes through town or there's an air inversion for a few days, what we see is immediately there are health problems. More people go to the emergency room with heart disease and asthma and lung disease. More people get admitted to the hospital. There are more admissions for infectious diseases like pneumonia and COVID. And you might think, well, why would that be? But remember, those particles are causing inflammation. And one of the big factors in making pneumonia or COVID a serious illness is abnormal amounts of inflammation in the body. We see more preterm birth, even for short-term exposures to things like wildfire. We see mental health impacts, including depression and anxiety. And there's clear evidence that people exposed for even a short time, a few days or a week, to high levels of pollution have higher overall mortality. So that's just in the short term. In the longer term, there's a lot of evidence collected over the last 20 years. There are still papers coming in all the time that connect different things. And I think there are some things that I put in bold that not everybody's aware of and that I think are really important. So we know that there's higher heart attack, heart failure, and stroke incidence and death. There are higher rates of lung cancer in people in polluted environments long term. We know that children who are born, newborns, have less lung function, and children who grow up chronically exposed to pollution grow up with essentially stunted lungs. They never develop their full lung capacity. It's likely that air pollution long term is linked also with depression and anxiety. Other cancers, even breast cancer or blood cancers, are possible. There's increasing and increasingly strong evidence that it affects our neurologic system, that it causes cognitive impairment and dementia in older adults. It's a likely factor in Parkinson's disease. And in children, there's pretty strong evidence that it causes a variety of neurodevelopmental problems, including learning difficulties, behavioral symptoms, and possibly even autism. We clearly know that people exposed to long-term die more. There's a higher mortality rate. So it is really important, and the effects are broad. This is all about outdoor air. We've got a lot of studies about outdoor air. And the other thing that I think is important to know about this is that not everybody has equal amounts of exposure. So this is a health disparity issue. It's an issue in what we call in medicine social determinants of health. It's an environmental justice issue. So neighborhoods with high populations of people of color have typically higher exposure to air pollution than those with high white populations. Low-income neighborhoods have higher exposure, and there's a long tradition, for example, of locating fossil fuel-powered plants near low-income neighborhoods, of locating freeways and high-traffic roadways near low-income neighborhoods. And what we know is that that has an impact. So long-term exposure to air pollution correlates directly with increased mortality in what we call a dose-dependent fashion. That means the more air pollution you get, the more likely you are to die. We also know from this same Medicare study that long-term air pollution correlates with the incidence of dementia. And I know we all have big concerns about things like dementia and other neurodevelopmental problems. So just a thought that we all breathe the air, but we don't all breathe the same air. So let's move now to buildings for a minute, and especially I'm going to focus on homes because that's where most of the evidence is. And where does the pollution come from in a building? Well, a lot of it comes from what's outside because outdoor air comes in and indoor air goes out. So ambient outdoor pollution is a factor. Home appliances, so dryers, furnaces, air conditioners, stoves and ovens, all of those appliances combust. When they combust fossil fuel, they contribute to pollution, and we'll talk a lot about that. But there's other things that are kind of outside our scope as a climate organization. There's tobacco, there's volatile compounds that come from new carpeting or new furniture. There are things like mold and dust mites and other allergens. There's pesticides and household chemicals. So let's just set those aside, and we're going to focus on the ambient outdoor air we talked about already, and about home appliances, because those are the things that burn fossil fuels that produce greenhouse gases, and they produce a lot of greenhouse gases. Nationwide, about 28% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. So I talked about those epidemiologic studies, and if you think it's difficult to do it looking across the country at census tracts or at zip codes, it's even harder to do it for indoor air, because you have to really look individually in people's homes, and there just hasn't been a lot of funding or a lot of studies. So what we have pretty well established is that there have been a number of studies in children who have pre-existing asthma. And what we know when they have a high exposure to particulate matters in their homes is that they have more days with asthma symptoms. They use more rescue inhalers like albuterol. They have more days of being sick with respiratory illnesses. They have worse lung function. So if we do a breathing test, we show that their lung function is poor. And that a study came out about 2 years ago showing that over 12% of childhood asthma could be directly attributed to the use of a gas stove in the child's home. There are some other things that have been studied and we're not sure about which sources of particulate matter. So is a gas stove the worst, or are other things just as bad? What happens if a home has some of those other pollutants like mold or other allergens? And there's been some work on, can diet help to reduce this problem? Can omega-3 intake help to reduce it? There's no certainty about any of that, but it's interesting. We know that things are complex, and disease processes often involve multiple different things working together. For other people, aside from children with asthma, there again is a dearth of studies. It's not easy to study, and we need more studies. But what we know is that COPD, for those who aren't in the medical field, that's emphysema, basically chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's worse and has more symptoms in people exposed to bad indoor air quality. It's possible that fossil fuel pollutants increase heart attacks and cardiac symptoms when the levels are high in the home. We know that that's true for secondhand smoke. It's less clear if it's true for, let's say, appliance combustion. A couple studies showed that filtering the air can reduce blood pressure, and maybe there's a correlation between high blood pressure and high particulate pollution in the home, but other studies didn't show any correlation. So I would say that's very much a maybe. There's increasing evidence about children's neurodevelopment and school performance. Quite a few studies have been done with school-based air quality, looking at school performance. That is difficult because, again, a lot of schools have mold or allergens, and so it's not necessarily only fossil fuel combustion that's producing problems with neurodevelopment and school performance. It's possible that indoor air pollution is related to other things, cancer, and inflammatory and metabolic diseases, diabetes included, reproductive harms, perinatal harms. We can kind of assume, since most of us spend 80 to 90% of our lives indoors, that if we know that outdoor air is bad, we can kind of assume that indoor air is bad for the same reasons. It's just not as well documented to this point. Just a few words about gas appliances. I'm in Southern Nevada. I think 2/3 of our homes have gas, at least heat with gas. 60% of homes across the US heat with gas. Gas appliances are worse than gas power plants in terms of their emissions. They emit twice as much of the nitrous oxygen compounds that form ozone. Gas appliances that heat your home or that you use to cook in the home, they increase they increase chemical pollutants inside the home, but also outside around your home. So in the neighborhood, if there's a neighborhood where everybody heats with gas and cooks with gas, and especially if it's a neighborhood where not everybody has highly efficient and well-weatherized homes, the immediate neighborhood has higher levels of pollution. We know that methane gas has to get drilled and has to get piped to our homes, and that there are emissions throughout that drilling and delivery process, and that those are very important greenhouse gases. 75% of gas stove emissions occur when the stove is off. And I have to admit, this kind of freaked me out. And I previously had just a little one burner cooktop. And when I had to cook a few things, I'd go ahead and turn on my gas stove. But when I read this, I just turned off all the gas to my stove, so it's not in my kitchen at all. And I bought a nice two-burner induction cooktop for under $200, and I do all my cooking on that now because I just thought, my goodness, my stove is poisoning me all day and all night when I don't even have it turned on. Again, 12% of asthma in children is associated with gas stoves, and there are some studies associating gas appliances with neurocognitive developmental problems in children. So again, that neurology risk is important for us to consider. We think that gas appliances cause up to 6,000 premature deaths every year in the US, and that those risks are probably higher in low-income houses, again, because poor weatherization may lead you to burn your furnace more or your air conditioner more. If you have a poorly ventilated kitchen, you have a higher burden of gas stove emittance inside the kitchen. And people in low-income neighborhoods already have a higher outdoor air pollution risk. So this is, again, I feel a justice issue. Another justice issue that's related, so, we can think about the gas stove and the fossil fuel combustion, and we can work on that in terms of electrifying buildings. But another part of what the Electrification Action Team is trying to do is to work on energy efficiency. And I think that's a really important health issue because of this affordability concern. So energy burden means a household having difficulty paying for their energy costs, basically. And a large proportion of households in the US have difficulty paying for their energy costs, including about a third of households with children and about a third of households of color. Half of low to moderate income households in a survey stated that they forego some basic necessities to pay an energy bill. So that might mean choosing between healthy food and your energy bill, or between buying all your medication and paying your electric bill, or going to the doctor and paying your electric bill, making trade-offs that can have unforeseen and serious health consequences. About a quarter of people keep their home at an unsafe temperature. This is a huge problem where I live, where we have truly dangerous summer heat. And so we are having people not only burdened with pollution, but also burdened with heat illness. And we know that electricity is becoming more difficult to afford in much of the country, and that our electric utilities that burn natural gas, that the use of natural gas is a big factor in the rate of that rise of electricity cost. Natural gas prices are projected to go up further this year. There are funding cuts to low-income assistance programs to help people afford their energy bills. And again, low-income homes often have really poor efficiency standards. So you can burn your furnace or your air conditioner and your home still is not at a comfortable temperature. So I think we can advocate for efficiency, not only in terms of reducing pollution, not only in terms of reducing greenhouse gases, but also in terms of trying to reduce the burden of high energy prices on folks. So what can we do about it? Well, the National Academies put together a beautiful study. It's really long. I did not read the whole thing, but it's really a great resource. And really, their message is electrification is the first line thing that you can do to improve building emissions. Ventilation, filtration, air cleaning, that has some effect. We really don't have a lot of good outcome data for post-electrification of homes for comparing all electric homes to homes that are burning fossil fuels. There just haven't been enough studies yet. So we need to have some bigger studies to really show us. But what we know about outdoor air and modeling studies is that we don't have to talk about climate change at all. We can just talk about air pollution because reducing air pollution has immediate, dramatic health improvements. And in most studies, the benefit you get from reducing your fossil fuel burning and electrifying and cleaning the air outweighs the cost of the measure to make it happen. And this is really too many words on this slide, but just a couple things. These are a few studies that looked at how rapidly reducing outdoor air pollution improves health. So the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, I think that was in 96, sometime in the 90s, they closed off roadways around the Olympic Games area. And what they noticed in that 17-day window of the Olympics is there was a dramatic decrease in the number of emergency department visits and hospitalizations for childhood asthma. People's lungs were literally better in days or a couple of weeks. We know from a study that took women at the beginning of pregnancy and gave them clean cook stoves that by the end of their pregnancy, you can document better birth weights, less preterm birth, and less perinatal mortality. And we know from studies both in Europe and in the US that there's again, a dose-dependent reduction in death if we clean at least outdoor air. So we really have some good news stories that we can tell. This can work in anybody's community or neighborhood that make the health case for electrification and efficiency really strong. So those are my references. That's all I had to say. I have a couple emails in addition to my role with Citizens Climate Lobby. I lead a group of health professionals called Nevada Clinicians for Climate Action. And so I welcome any communication from anybody. And I will stop sharing and turn it over, I think, either to Pete or to Jay.
Yeah, Jay, why don't you jump in here? Jay has some great observations linking tonight's conversation to our shiny new bridge approach in CCL. But yes, first, Rob, thank you. And a huge hand for Joanne. Thank you very much, Joanne.
So, Pete, I wasn't sure, do you have the slides or do you need me to pull up the two I wrote?
I do have them.
Okay.
2 seconds.
So as we're getting started and Pete's pulling up the presentation, we kind of put bridge in between. And what I want, maybe part of the message I want people to hear as we talk about the bridge program, Joanne had mentioned about sometimes as we talk about and we talk to people about advocacy, maybe it's about air pollution as a way to get in the door to talk about climate because it's something that's relatable to folks. So part of what I wanted to kind of lay out that CCL has what they have, the bridge program that's underway. And the idea of the bridge program is that in addition to being able to talk about things from a technical climate perspective, that we can't even get to that conversation until we understand that people don't process in a vacuum and that people really process information really through identity, values, and interpretation that comes from really their emotional self. And then the other part is that you have to have trust to precede policy movement before we can talk about the technical pieces. So kind of what Joanne talked about, the idea of air pollution as this connecting point to people that they can relate to from their emotional identity self allows us to really dive into the conversation and the technical conversation that people can act on. And so the bridge program is designed to be able to do that. And the model that they're using, that they're talking about, is this idea of the elephant and the rider, where basically the elephant is as you say, the identity or the emotional self. And that's the piece of your biological self that is taught to over generations to react to things. So before your rational mind ever reacts to a surprise or a flight or fight, your emotional side has already got your brain in action and moving before your rational side can even contemplate or be able to participate. And that typically when we see people that dig their elephant in, as they call on an emotional side, is because they've heard a trigger word and it activates the emotional center of the brain, and then you can't even get to the rational side. So the bridge program is to be able to get past that. And so where I wanted to leave with is, as we talked about this, and there's a series of 3 units. I put in the chat the one that was just held on training to build skills, and how we do that is that electrification and health have actual connections that we can look at from a bridge perspective, where we're connecting electrification and health with lived experience around asthma, comfort, bills, and dignity, right? And that we connect health with how we pay what we call affordable energy. How much do we pay for our bills? What is our comfort level? How do people, do they want to be able to take care of their kids? That this offers an opportunity for us to use bridge to be able to strengthen that conversation and move people to taking action. Go to the next one. If you got it. Yeah. And so I want to kind of borrow from Pete's piece here, is that, how do we avoid the Charlie Brown syndrome? We have people that, all they hear maybe sometimes when the expert comes in is they hear the wah, 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 because they're not engaged in the thinking part of the brain. And so maybe some of the connections we can do as we talk about indoor air, we talk about asthma, we talk about cardiovascular disease, we talk about kids, and then we put in with energy burden, and then on electrification that we have on the shelf solutions that can actually improve daily life. So we're connecting actions you can do around electrification with a place that we can actually talk to people that kind of relates to their emotional self, so that we can move forward on the policy side. So in the end, the idea of the bridge program and this connection to today between health and electrification that I've been interested in a while is that if we can speak to the elephant first, so we can get people to see here, then we can work on the urgency that we all feel that we want to do around the changes we want to make. And then the last piece is that from my perspective, medical and clinicians and medical folks are really trusted entities within communities. So where else is the better place to engage in this conversation around the elephant and get the rational mind to go, but through health clinicians and providers, which are really trusted entities in communities. So, so with that, Pete, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, fantastic. Thanks so much, Jay. Appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to cover basically 3 things. First, why electrify? Second, household finances. And third, yes, the grid can handle it. So there's a lot to get through. I've got quite a few slides. I'll move fairly quickly. One thing about my slides is every single slide has on it one or more links to authoritative sources, and that makes them very useful for looking stuff up later if I do move too fast. And I've already dropped the link in the chat for where this slide deck is located in Google Slides, and there's a QR code actually, and I'll come back to the QR code, but it's there on the title slide. All right, so my own background, U.S. Coast Guard Academy graduate too long ago, and 25 years active duty service, 10 more in the defense industry. Then during that time, I saw Inconvenient Truth, decided I've got to go do something in alternative energy, and self-apprenticed as a solar contractor. I got my own solar contractor's license. My marquee project was this solar carport at the bottom right, but ton of experience in military, in business, and in solar. And then I learned after 5 years and starting my solar company in my mid and late 50s, I learned that was a silly time to go from working mostly on desks to mostly on ladders and roofs. So, and then I became much more active with CCL and some other climate groups. And I moved towards building electrification as one of the most challenging pieces of the entire decarbonization puzzle. We all have our why. This is why I do this. 3 lovely granddaughters that I would like to see have as great an opportunity in life as I have had. Reminder that it's all about the impacts, and we as CCLer understand this broad range of impacts from climate change. It is what we called, when I was in the military, a force multiplier. Climate change amplifies the effects of what used to be natural disasters. Now they're fossil-fueled natural disasters. I think most of us are quite familiar with this. This is a slide showing NOAA's tracking of what they call billion-dollar disasters since 1980, and you can see how much it has grown. The phenomenon of wildfires or flooding or hurricanes causing very expensive damages to the national economy, to the insurance company. Insurance companies, by the way, have slides that very much mirror this. So we can see very clearly that there's a huge financial cost of climate change in addition to the environmental. This is another really important view of the financial cost. The U.S. government has an agency named the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and in 2019, during the 3rd year of President Trump's first term, the CFTC, with 34 commissioners, all appointed by President Trump, they chartered a study by a subcommittee that said, yes, it should take approximately $15 to $20 trillion to drive down fossil fuels in the economy, but there will be a $50 to $140 trillion benefit. That's pretty impressive. We know the World Health Economic Forum every year updates a global risks outlook, and for several years, climate action failure has been both the highest likelihood and the highest impact, along with infectious diseases, extreme weather, both of which are amplified by climate change. So those are some of the things many of us have already known. What Joanne just described to us is something that many of us haven't known. Oops, apologize for the slow sequencing here. But combusting gas in our homes, I've got a slide here that shows stoves, and I'll explain why, but it's also from our space heating, water heating, laundry, and a handful of other uses, but those are the big 4. All of these combustion byproducts here on the left are emitted when we're combusting methane, and they have these effects on the right that Joanne described to us in great detail. And so the question is, can we do anything about it? Can we actually eliminate fossil fuels? And the answer is yes. Climate action looks like this. And notice that on the lower left, the energy sources that I'm showing are very low carbon, and I'll quantify that for you in just a minute. On the right are all the different types of machines that use that clean energy. The interesting thing is the machines on the right look very much like their fossil-fired counterparts, but they're powered by clean electricity, and every machine that every time we replace a gas appliance in our buildings with an electric one, we drive down our on-site fossil combustion, and then as the grid is getting cleaner, that investment in that machine becomes an appreciating asset. Here's the quantification of how much cleaner the low carbon sources of energy are versus fossil fuels. So we'll start at the top here. This is a great summary slide from Our World in Data, and you can see that they made a single graph to show both safety, in terms of deaths per unit of energy created, human deaths, and greenhouse gas emissions. And as we all know intuitively, and many of us know the details, coal, oil, and gas all have very high emissions of greenhouse gases. Turns out they also have quite high death rates throughout the life cycle. But the sources of energy at the bottom, plus a recent addition that our Waldron data didn't have, which is geothermal. These are extremely low greenhouse gas emissions per unit of energy. So hydropower, nuclear energy, wind, solar, and geothermal. Here is a slide I made of 18 studies showing that zero pollution and zero carbon don't mean we have to go back to living in caves. The technologies that are on the shelf today make it technically feasible to electrify well over 80%, approaching 90% of the US and global economies, and to have it be less expensive than the status quo. And the less expensive is, I talked about the macroeconomic piece of that earlier with the CFTC's tens of trillions of dollars in cost, but $100 trillion in benefit. And I'll talk a little bit later about the microeconomic, the household kitchen table microeconomics. Here's a slide from a meta-study from 2021 by Dr. Zeke Hausfather, who was then at the Breakthrough Institute. And he compared 3 of the leading net zero studies that I just showed you on the previous slide. One by Dr. Jesse Jenkins, who many of us know from Princeton, and he's been on a CCL Ask Me Anything with Dana Nuccitelli. Vibrant Clean Energy, Dr. Christopher Clack, and then Dr. Jim Williams from UC San Francisco. Each of those scientists led teams doing peer-reviewed studies looking at what will the electricity generation mix look like starting in 2020, or how will it change? They used 2020 as their baseline because they were all done right about that time, and looked at what's it going to be like in 2050. And the answer is all 3 of them concluded, yes, we can electrify close to 90% of the US economy. This was focused on the US. And that in order to do that, we would have to increase the US grid capacity by somewhere between 2 times and 3 times over the course of 30 years. Now, that sounds like a lot, but in the 1950s, the United States we doubled our electrical grid capacity, and in the 1960s, we did it again. So, and in 30 years, you can get an awful lot done, and I'll show some more detail on that. Phil, I see the comment about surplus grid capacity. We'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you. So the short answer to the solution to both climate change and air pollution is hashtag electrify everything and hashtag decarbonize the grid. It's that simple, 2 hashtags, everybody. And there's only a tiny amount of detail in each one of them, right? So here's a look inside the average U.S. household. We've got household energy use by major appliance. This data comes from a survey that the U.S. Energy Information Administration performs approximately every 3 to 5 years. The timing has fluctuated, but we can see in the red and blue, these are the 2 major individual energy uses in United States homes, and it's not a surprise to anyone. Space heating and then space cooling. And we can see the variation. Space cooling in blue is higher in the summer months. These, of course, vary very substantially by region. This is a nationwide average. But then across the nation, water heating is another major contributor. cooking is such a small total energy use and small total emissions at the planetary scale that they didn't even call out cooking as a major appliance here. It's lumped in with other end uses. But I would offer that even though cooking is the smallest probably gas use in most of our houses, it is by far the most damaging to our health because of things that we heard with Laurie. If you have a gas furnace or a gas water, I'm sorry, not Laurie, Joanne, if you have a gas furnace or a gas water heater, it's vented to the outside of your house. But if you have a gas stove, you are burning an open flame inside your house. And we had some conversation in the chat about the fact that in Utah, at least, even when households have an exhaust hood or the appearance of an exhaust hood over their stove, only 1% of them are vented to the outside. That was very scary. I did not know that it was that high, and that probably varies by region too. All right, so here I'm going to skip past this one in the interest of time, and we're going to jump right into what I think is the most important piece of the appliance transition. It's hashtag cooking with magnets, because the Gas Association has spent millions and millions of dollars over the course of 90 years creating in us the greenwashed impression that cooking with gas is better than cooking with electricity. So here's a quick history of the way in which we've cooked in this country, right? And here's a quick summary of our human resistance to change and all of these things, give up my corded telephone and my film camera, all of those things. But here's the beginning of the American Gas Association's greenwashing campaign. In the 1930s, the gas industry had just lost the battle for household lighting to the electricity industry and that doggone Thomas Edison guy. And they were determined not to lose the battle for heating and cooking. And they fairly wisely chose, even in the 1930s, they chose to make the cooking device the gateway appliance. One of the American Gas Association's executives knew some copywriters on Bob Hope's radio show and fed him the line, "Now you're cooking with gas." And I must have said that 1,000 times in my adult life until just the last 3 or 4 years. I used it as a way to say, now I'm doing things right. And now I'm realizing just how wrong that is. But now we're moving from the early 1930s and Bob Hope to 1939. Here's the way the American Gas Association advertised gas stoves back then. I'm not going to say anything about misogyny, but we can all see that. Here, and here we are in the 1980s or 90s with some influencers.
We all cook better when we're cooking with gas.
And that was enough of that. Here's the induction stove in my house. But like Joanne, for almost 2 years, my wife and I had a gas range in this exact spot. And we had a double burner induction cooktop, portable, sitting on the gas grill grates, and we cooked almost all of our meals about that. Joanne has another link in the chat about Climate Town. If people haven't seen Climate Town, it's very well done and funny, in addition to informative look at climate change impacts and solutions. Here's some pricing on induction ranges. You can see here, and these prices are a little over a year old, but you can see there's 2 induction ranges available at around $1,100. They're a little bit less expensive in the last year. I've found gas ranges and electric resistance coil ranges as cheap as a little over $600, but you can get a pretty doggone inexpensive cooktop. I didn't update this slide. It still mentions IRA rebates, and that's not happening anymore, unfortunately. But there's a wide range of choices and prices in the induction range lineup. Cooking with magnets works just like you're charging your smartphone on a pad. It's induction, and so there's a magnetic field created with electromagnetics in the stove, and the electromagnetic field excites molecules in the bottom of the pan if the pan is made of magnetic material and makes the pan hot. All of the energy goes into the pan, not escaping into the air around it. So it's a little bit more efficient, even though it's much more efficient, even though it's a small energy use compared to the other major uses in the home. We've heard many of the reasons people claim they like gas cooking because the gas industry tells them this is true are that, well, gee, gas is more powerful, it's more responsive. And well, here's 3 links to different sources that compared the actual BTUs per hour for induction and gas, and you can see that induction stoves are significantly more powerful than gas. They're also much more. They're at least as responsive because when you turn the power knob down, the electromagnetic field turns down instantly, just like you get that quick response with gas. So it's much faster than an electric coil resistant stove. This one is interesting. This is a 56-inch cooktop that is from Thermador. It's $6,000 or $7,000, but it doesn't have defined zones where the electromagnet works. The electromagnets are under the complete thing, and if I slide any of my pots and pans to any part of the cooktop, they will create heat right there. So this is a nice high-end one. This and other induction stoves can actually, or induction cooktops, can be mounted underneath of your, say, marble or granite or fake marble or fake granite countertop. And so you can make it appear as if you're cooking just on your countertop surface. That's a pretty cool trick too. Anyway, you can cook with woks. So cooking is, again, the gateway appliance, but the induction experience, once you've tried it, is substantially better, and it's way better for your health. I'm going to talk very briefly about space heating, and we're only 5 minutes from the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to accelerate through some of this stuff. These are pictures of heat pumps. Basically, a heat pump is the equivalent of a two-way air conditioner. So it can either move heat from inside your house to the outside, like an air conditioner does, or you flip a reversing valve and it moves heat in the opposite direction from seemingly cold air outside to creating warmth inside. So here's some pictures of different heat pump components. There's always an outdoor unit like this one in the lower right. There's a variety of different types of indoor units. We're used to seeing these sort of wall warts. There are others that you can mount in the floor, in ceilings, and in inside walls. Here's a detailed explanation of how the heat pump works. And again, the links are there and folks can look at that on your own. Here's my old air conditioner outdoor unit getting replaced with the new heat pump outdoor unit, which is the same width but less than half the thickness. So smaller, more efficient, and quieter. Here's my old furnace and air handler. I have a ducted heat pump system. There's the old furnace in the attic. And here's the new heat pump in the attic. Looks nearly identical, a big box with a bunch of duct tubes coming out of it and heading to the different rooms in the house. And here's some trusted sources for heat pumps. One that I really love is Nate Adams, the House Whisperer. He's a practicing HVAC contractor, trying to do the right thing, relatively conservative politically, and brings some of that crowd into the conversation. Very active on Facebook and a little bit on LinkedIn and Twitter. Heat pump water heaters look just like other water heaters, but they generate heat by using a heat pump on the top. Laundry, here's in the upper right and upper left, these are the original laundry drying with wind and solar, hanging your clothes out to dry. But there are heat pump dryers in addition to electric resistance, and many of these nowadays have all-in-one options. So you can get a single machine which both washes your laundry and dries it. And the price of a single machine is, in this case, $1,800, $1,900, similar to getting two standalone machines, but you save half of the space and you don't have to move your laundry from one machine to another mid-cycle. Let's see. Electric vehicles. I'm going to talk about this very briefly. One of the memes is, electric cars are, powered directly by coal plants, but even in states that still have high coal penetration, electric cars are so much more efficient. They still are less emissions intensive. But let's talk about the capability of electric end-use machines for a minute. Electric motors are far smaller and more powerful than gasoline engines. This is just a sample of all the major multi-million-dollar hypercars that lose a drag race to a Tesla Model S, which costs a little over $100,000. So if you're interested in performance, electric motors are the way to go. Here's another one. I took this picture 2 years ago at the Electrify Expo here in my hometown of Long Beach. This is an old 1980 pickup truck that used to have a 145 horsepower 305 cubic inch engine in here, and they replaced it with an electric motor 4 times as powerful and barely visible in the depths of all the space that's left from the old gas engine. Here's another size to weight thing. In the bottom right, this is a 400 horsepower gasoline outboard motor on a boat. Above it is an electric motor that's just as powerful in the little space here where the propeller shaft comes out the bottom of the outboard motor. It's a little bit larger, but that's how much flexibility you get with electric motors. Here's for big ships. This is a 2,000 horsepower diesel engine that's used in ships in the 100-foot to 200 or 300 foot size range. That's bigger than, this is a V12. It's 7 feet long and 50 inches wide, 4 feet wide. So it's way bigger physically than would fit in an over-the-road truck. This little electric motor here is the same horsepower, 2,000 horsepower, but it's only 15 inches long and 22 inches wide. Anyway, I'm going to spin through the rest of these really quickly. Can we generate all our energy from zero carbon sources, and can the grid handle it? this is a really valuable perspective on how the electric grid has changed over the last 90 years. And we can see in the early part of that time, it was mostly petroleum, then coal, and in the mid-century through nearly the end of the century, the United States built a lot of coal plants. We also built some gas plants in the 70s and 80s, but look at this boom in natural gas power plants in the late 90s and into the 2000s. That was initiated by the spike in fracking. And now what I'll show you in subsequent slides is how renewable energy, wind and solar predominantly, are now taking off just in the same way that gas did 20 years ago. So first, throughout the second half of the 20th century, the big saying was coal is king. It was 50 to 60% of US electricity generation. But in the early 2000s, as gas displaced it, we can see the blue line for gas here growing, and then the coal dropping. Where it's dotted lines, the original slide that I really liked stopped in 2019. And so I just continued the lines by adding the 2024 totals out here. So you can see gas has increased, but look at what's happening with wind and solar here. And last year, they displaced coal for the first time. Why? Because solar panels have gone down in price by 99.5%, from $101 a watt to 10 cents a watt. That's 99.9%. And this is the UK. Renewables have overtaken fossil fuels in the United Kingdom, all fossil, not just coal. And skipping through that, this is super useful. In California, in the last 3 years, we've deployed 17 gigawatts of batteries, and that's out of a total peak demand in California of about 48 gigawatts on the hottest summer afternoon in August. And so we have batteries that are able to carry the load of fully 1/3 of the California electric grid for 2 to 4 hours in the evening as the sun is going down. So they're capturing all that solar energy during the day, dispatching it during the evening, and they're preventing gas peaker plants from ramping up, which is what they've done in these years in the upper right. But in 2024, you can see how little the gas peaker plants ramped up in the evening. It's a massive difference, and it's really fixing the grid. I'm going to pause there, and we'll take a look at the chat and answer any questions. I know we're a couple of minutes over, so thank you.
Yeah, if you guys are willing to share your emails with people, that would be great, because we try to respect people's time on the call here. And because I think all of you presenters are going to be willing to answer people's questions by email. And then if maybe the three of you can combine all your slides together just to make it easier. And I have a list of everybody that requested them. And yeah. And everybody that didn't go to the link to log in to report that you were at this meeting, it'd be great if you can do so. This was fantastic. Yeah. Just should have been a 90-minute talk instead of a 60-minute.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around.
It should be something at the June meeting. Maybe.
Hey, Lori, as you go through the chapter of questions that weren't answered, if you capture them and send them to me or Pete, we can provide answers and try to get that out as well.
Okay, yeah, and people that didn't get them answered yet, just plan on sending an email. You just got the emails of the presenters here, so
Right, that'll work.
Yeah.
I might
And
not.
Jay, I've saved the chat, so we have all that.
Okay. Went in and tried to get a few of them anyway.
I'm wondering, I showed up late. I was wondering if you talked about carbon monoxide being emitted from ovens, gas ovens, when they're first turned on.
That is true. I didn't mention it, but you're right, George.
Yeah, we discovered it when we did a home inspection, and so whenever we turn on the oven, we also turn on our vent, our above the stove vent, which vents outside.
Thanks a lot, everybody. And Pete,
All
I'll
right.
share my slides with you. You can put them together. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can easily merge them.
Thanks a
Thanks,
bunch.
folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting.